welcome back to FordeeTV. I'm your host, Fordee. So today we are back in After Effects for After Effects for Beginners, Part 4, and we're working with masks, yo. What are masks? Masks are important, baby. They allow us to do all kinds of things in After Effects. And if you've used another program like Photoshop, for example, it's the same thing, right? Masks enable us to create transparency on a layer that they are applied to, right? What does that mean? Well, why don't we get into it and I'll show you. I'm going to click on Create New Composition by clicking on this button here. Comp 1 name is fine, 1920 by 1080, which is 1080p, setting to 30 frames per second and 10-second duration, just fine, huh? The background color doesn't matter. So right now we have nothing going on. Over here I have a bunch of assets loaded. I'm going to select this one right here, drag it down into the composition. This is a photograph of Barcelona Beach, or Barcelona at the beach, where the W is in Barcelona, huh? Super beautiful, etc. If I press S on my keyboard, you'll notice that right now it's set to 100%. This photograph is 3600 by 2400 pixels, so a lot larger than 1080p. So we can scale it down if we want, but really unnecessary because what I'm going to show you is masks, right? So the first type of mask you might end up working with are parametric shape masks, right? Or shape masks. Over here, where you would normally select the shape tools, rectangular, rounded rectangle, ellipse tool, etc. If you didn't watch the tutorial on shapes, that's part 3 of the series. Definitely go check it out, right? So I'll select rounded rectangle tool. After I do so, as long as I have a layer selected, it's going to draw a mask for that layer. So when I click and I drag, I've just created a mask, right? That mask currently is showing everything inside, and the reason for that, over here in the mask properties, it says mask 1 is set to add. Add means everything inside of this closed path is going to be shown. Everything outside this path is going to be transparent. So realize there's nothing else in my composition. If I come over here and enable transparency, exactly what I said, everything outside that mask is now transparent, and that's what masks do. They enable us to create transparency on a layer. So there are different modes, right? Besides add, we have subtract. It does the exact opposite of add, right? Next, we have none. Usually, if you select none, the mask is not doing anything. But you may be using none, for example, if I was going to mask out this W building right here, then maybe I have it set to none so I could better see what I'm doing, so I could see the pixels, etc. Of course, I would be working in a more zoomed in percentage than 100%, huh? So let me explain the next ones, right? We have intersect, lighten, darken, difference. These 4, they come into play when you have more than one mask. So let's while this layer is selected, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have one of the shape tools selected, and I'm going to click and drag and make sure that these 2 masks intersect, right? Right now, the first one is set to none. If I set it to add, and they're both set to add, then you see that it's showing both of those masks, right? Let's come over here and select intersect, and we'll change it to both of them to intersect. That's saying wherever these 2 masks are intersecting each other, show us there. So it's just this area where they overlap, right? Alternatively, at the bottom, you'll see difference, right? If I select difference, then wherever they intersect, don't show that, make transparency, but where they don't intersect, then have it set to add, if you will, right? The next 2 options, lighten and darken, that would be used, for example, if you had, if there are 2 different layers and there are color values that are different. They're just like blend modes where it would show the lighter pixels from one layer or darker pixels from one layer of that mask interacting with the mask below. Excuse me. I'm going to set, or I'm going to click on the second mask, press delete on my keyboard. Now I only have this mask here. Let's talk about mask properties. If I click on the arrow right next to mask 1, you'll see these are the mask properties. Alternatively, if I close out all the properties for this layer and make sure I have it selected, press MM on my keyboard, it's going to show me all mask properties, right? First, you have mask path, right? This is so that you can animate the mask, right? So real quick, on frame 0 or the first frame, I'm going to click on the stopwatch, move forward in time, doesn't matter exactly where, and then I'm going to select my selection tool. I'm going to double click on one of these points, and that will select the whole thing, and then I could drag this down. Now if I scrub through my timeline, we'll see that I've animated that mask, right? Super cool. I'll go ahead and click on the stopwatch while I'm at frame 1, and it's going to keep that value and turn off the animation. Next we have mask feather. I can go ahead and click and drag here, and you'll see that it's feathering out the edges right now uniformly, right? If I wanted to just feather out in X, for example, I'm going to go ahead and press Command-Z on my keyboard to undo that. I'll click on the link icon right here to unlink them. And then if I drag this up, you'll notice that I have a harsh edge in the Y value, but on the X value, you notice on the X edges, it's going ahead and it's creating some feather, right? Super cool. I'll press Command-Z on my keyboard to undo that. Turn on the link, and let's move to mask opacity. Whatever is being masked, if you want to fade that, you have the ability to do so here by turning down the opacity of what's inside that mask. Excuse me. Next, we have mask expansion. Mask expansion. So right now, this working path right here, which is the rounded rectangle, if we wanted to make, if we wanted to push this mask out further, instead of coming here to the mask shape and then transforming the size of it, etc., we could, if we like the shape of it, we could take this up in a positive value, and you'll notice that we can now see more than what the rectangular mask is cut out to because we've increased its expansion by 128 pixels. Alternatively, we could, of course, lower this value into the negative range and show less than what that rounded rectangle is set to, right? So that's what mask expansion does. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 0. And now we have seen a bunch of the different properties. We've seen, we've talked about the different modes that you can use here, right? And obviously we were set to difference right there, but there's no other mask, so that it's not interacting with anything else, so it will just be an add value, right? If there were other masks, then it would set it to the difference because there were more than one mask, right? So when you are working with masks, let's talk about selecting masks, because I showed real quick. I switched over to the selection tool and I came over to one of these points, and when I double click, you'll notice that the bounding box changes to more of a grayish color, and that means that I can move this thing as a whole, right? If I press enter on my keyboard, all of a sudden that goes away. All of the points are selected. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a bit so you can see this better. Press spacebar on my keyboard. I'm going to click and drag, and you'll notice you see these little points. All of these points are filled in, right? If I click on one, it doesn't do anything. But if I hold shift on my keyboard, it will unselect this one point. Now all the other points are selected. I can then just click on the one that I unselected, and now only this one is selected. So now I can move this around. Let's go ahead and zoom out so you can better see what I'm doing. So at 100%, let's press spacebar to drag this over to the center. Looking good. Now I can click and I can drag this point to wherever I want it to be. And alternatively, I can come to any one of the other points, come here, click and drag, and maybe now this, maybe this looks cool, right? So if I want to select multiple points, so right now I have this one selected, I can press shift on my keyboard, select another one, press while holding shift, click on another one, and now it's going to bring all 3 of those points, right? So that's pretty cool. Again, so no matter how many points you want to select and move, you can use your shift key to select, to add to a selection, or remove from the selection. Shift key is what you're going to want to use. If you want to select all your points to move it, double click on any of the points. It creates this bounding box, and now we can move this around as we see fit, right? So let's work with a real world example using a shape mask. I'm going to go ahead over in my composition. I'm going to select this layer, press delete on my keyboard, and boom, it's gone. I'm going to come over here to my assets. I'm going to click on this video right here, drag it into my composition. Up here in the properties, you'll see that it is a 4K video. If I right click on this layer, go down to transform and select fit to comp width, now this is 1080p resolution. If I scrub through my timeline, you'll see how this video basically zooms in on Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. What a beautiful basilica, and it's almost finished, yo. So, like I said, this is a real world example, right? So I'm going to zoom out from 100%, go down to 15%, just so I can come over here to the rectangle tool and I can click and I can draw. And the reason I wanted to zoom out to 50% is so that I can make sure that this was larger than the composition, because if I zoomed in, I couldn't have clicked this far away from it, right? Next, I'll come into my composition, select this layer, press Command-D on my keyboard, and now I've just made a duplicate, right? On the bottom layer, I'm going to come over here, select the mask, and I'm going to press delete. Now we have 2 layers, one with a mask, one without. I'm going to hide the top layer by clicking on the visibility icon here, and now we're just working in the bottom layer. I'll press S on my keyboard to bring up scale, and I'm going to scale this up, right? Then I'm going to press P on my keyboard, and I'm going to move it a little bit over in the X axis to the right, right? Now that we've moved it a little bit, that's cool. I'm going to come over here to my effects and presets, and we haven't really gotten into effects. We are going to in the next video. I'm going to talk about effects, how to make changes, what things to apply, etc., etc. So look forward to the next video, hopefully coming this week. I'm going to come over here to effects and presets, and I'm going to type in GAU for Gaussian blur, right? Under blur and sharpen, I'm going to select this effect. I'm going to drag it onto that layer, the bottom layer. And here, if I turn this up, let's set it to 50, for example, press enter, you'll notice this is super blurred now, right? Next, I'm going to come over to effects and presets and type in tint. I'm going to click on it right here, drag it underneath Gaussian blur right here, because currently this layer is selected. I could come here and just drop it here, or I could drop it there, right? Now in the tint, I want to remap my white pixel values from white. I want to maybe bring it to some kind of blue. I'll say okay. That's looking pretty cool, huh? Now, if we click the visibility of the layer above, we can see that it is making transparent pixels outside of that mask, right? Make sure I have the layer selected and it will show that mask. Now, remember, with the selection tool selected, I'm going to double click on one of those points, which will select the whole mask. I'm going to click on one of the corners like this to rotate it, and then I'm going to bring it over here to the right. So it is not currently showing any of that layer. Remember, it's set to add, so anything inside this rectangle is being shown, everything else is transparent. If I open up the mask properties of this layer by selecting and pressing MM, it brings up the properties. I can animate this mask by clicking on the stopwatch next to mask path. I'm going to go ahead and move forward in time, let's say to 2 seconds, and then I'm going to double click with the selection tool selected on one of these points, selecting the entire mask, and I'm going to reposition. If I hold shift as I'm dragging, it will constrain its movement to just one axis, or either X or Y, right? So I'll come over here and I'll stop right there, right? Now if I go ahead and scrub back in my timeline, you're going to see that as this comes forward, it starts to show. And of course, the redraw is a little bit slow. Let's change it from full to half. Let's also go from 50% to 100% view. And as I move this forward, you see that it is showing the basically this top layer because it's set to add. Well, if we wanted the opposite, we could come and switch it from add to subtract, and now it's just showing the bottom layer in the middle. Of course, that's not what we want, so we'll switch it back to add, and there we are, right? Now, of course, you can do other things in this particular example. If we wanted, when it got to 2 seconds, we could select this layer, press Command D to bring it up, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the mask. Select the masks here, press delete, and now we're seeing the whole thing. We'll come over here to 1 second, 15 frames, and we're going to press T on our keyboard to bring up opacity. We're going to drop the opacity down to 0, right? There you go. We'll click on the stopwatch. We'll come forward in time to 2 seconds, and we'll turn this up to 100%. Now I'm going to bring this back to the beginning. I'm going to press, let's change the feather. So in the second layer that has the mask, let's bring up the feather. Let's set that to 20 pixels maybe. Press enter, both on X and Y. Now I'm going to create a RAM preview by pressing spacebar on my keyboard. I'll speed this up in post so you don't have to watch it render, huh? So again, I'll go ahead and bring the playhead back to the beginning. I'll press spacebar. Boom, something like that. A real world example. Obviously, you could tweak this to perfection. This was real quick just to show you a little something, right? So let's keep moving, baby. I'm going to click on the arrows over here, select my project pane. I'm going to come into the composition, select the first layer and the last layer by holding shift on my keyboard. I'll press delete and they're gone. Next, let's come and find this asset right here. It's a girl wearing a beanie, huh? We're going to drag it in. Hey, she's looking mighty fine. Look at those lips, yo. I'm going to right click on the layer, go to transform, and set fit to comp with. So now this is the girl. What are we going to do to this beautiful girl that, I mean, we don't really need to do anything. She looks amazing. But let's say we want to change the color of her eyes, right? So first, we probably want to see them a bit better. So let's increase our view from 100% to 400% zoom. I'm going to press space bar, click and drag to reposition. Now the pixelation is because we are zoomed in at 400%. Keep that in mind, yo. I'm going to come back here to frame 0 or frame 1, right? And I'm going to create a mask for her eyes, right? So I'm going to press Command D on my keyboard to make a duplicate. And on this bottom layer, we're going to call this main, right? On this next layer, we are going to press enter and call this left. because that's her left eye, or maybe left eye, right? So we understand it better. And instead of main, we could rename this to girl, right? If we spell it right, that would be even better. On left eye, right? Reminds me, what was that girl's name in that hip-hop group, TLC, right? She's not with us anymore. Rest in peace, sweetie. Anyway, so we're going to come up here to our shape tools, and we are going to select the ellipse tool. If we select that ellipse tool and we start to draw, you'll notice that it starts to create a mask, right? Now, the thing is, can we see exactly what we're doing? No, we can't, right? And the reason we can't is because the layer below is showing us everything, right? And again, remember, with this left eye selected, if we change this from add to none, we can still see everything that we're doing, right? The next thing we want to do, remember, is we don't want to show this eyebrow, eyelid, right? So we're jumping a little bit ahead, but we were talking about the pen tool. That is the next tool we can use to create masks. So I'm going to select this left eye layer, select the pen tool right here, and then when I click and drag, I can come here and then come here, and when I click, it's creating a Bezier curve, right? Now I can come up here, come up here, come up here. It doesn't matter that this is set like this, right? Because what I want to do is set this to intersect, right? No, difference, my mistake. And we'll set the first mask to add, to show the eye, and on the second mask, we want to set that to subtract. So we're getting rid of everything. My brain, huh? Anyway, so now this is just the eye. This is perfect. If we show the layer below, we only have that eye selected, right? So now that we've got the left eye, let's go ahead and do the right eye. We can duplicate either of these layers, right? We're just going to duplicate the left eye by pressing Command D on our keyboard with it selected. We'll click on the disclosure triangle right here. We'll select mask. We'll press delete on our keyboard. And we're going to come over here to this right eye with the ellipse tool selected. And we will start to draw out an ellipse, right? Pressing spacebar as we're drawing so that we can come in here and make sure that it's positioned correctly, etc. We're going to go ahead and let go of our mouse. And now we have the eye selected, except the eyelid's in the way. We'll select the pen tool with this layer still selected so we can draw another mask. I'm going to click and drag to start this Bezier curve. And now when I come here, I'm going to try to draw this so that it covers the eyelid. I'll click here, and I'll click here. Now, if I go to this second mask and change it from add to subtract, now it's just the pupil, right? These eyes are fairly gray, right? So if I want to make a change to their color, probably using tint is my best option. I'll click and I'll drag tint on top of the left eye. I'll remap the white from white to maybe a green, huh? So something like this. This is a bit much. So if I select the left eye layer and press T on my keyboard, I could drop the opacity here, huh? And as I drop the opacity of this layer, maybe let's try 30. Boom. Now it's just a little bit, right? That's looking good. One of the other things we probably want to do is open up the mask options for the left eye. Pressing MM while it's selected, it's going to show me all the mask options. And I probably want to feather it a bit, right? So maybe 5 pixels, I don't know, or 10 pixels or something, just to make sure that we don't have any harsh edges there. And now if I click away, if I click on the girl layer, look at that eye, it looks amazing. So what I want to do is I want to come to this left eye layer, I'm going to select the tint, I'm going to press Command C, and then I'm going to select the left eye. If I press Command V, it applies the tint there. What do we need to do? We need to change the opacity. I'll press T on my keyboard with that layer selected, and I'm going to change this to 30%, which is what we used for the other one. We can verify by pressing T on our keyboard and seeing they're both set to 30%. I'll close the disclosure triangle for the left eye. I'll press MM on my keyboard to open up all the mask properties. And again, we're going to feather both masks by 10 pixels. If I go ahead and select the girl layer and then I come out from 400% to 100%, look at those beautiful green eyes. This is the reason for masks, or one of many millions of reasons, right? So that you can make changes to specific things in your composition, etc. Let me press spacebar to reposition this. I always forget to do those little things, huh? All right, so now we've talked about using the pen tool to create a closed pass. What's important with the pen tool, right? So if I hide these two layers, right? And now we're just working with the girl layer. If I click with the pen and I start to drag, this right here is a path. However, it's not closed, so it's not going to create a mask. If I click here, and then close this, now this is a mask, right? Of course, you can change the Bezier handles after the fact, right? And using a pen tool is very powerful because when you want to remove something, this is going to give you the best or the biggest level of detail to remove or add something to a scene, etc., right? So let's keep it going, guys. I'm going to click on project here, and then I'm going to come over to my comp. I'm going to delete all of these layers by clicking on the first one, holding shift, clicking on the last one, pressing delete, right? The next thing we're going to talk about are text masks, which we will talk about a couple different things with text masks. So let's right click in our composition here, select new and select solid. After we do so, we'll make sure it's comp size by clicking here and set OK. Next, with this black solid layer selected, we'll come over here to our effects and presets, start typing in ramp, and we will drag radiant ramp onto this layer. Don't worry so much about all the effects we're using today. We are going to go over effects in the next video in this series. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the start of the ramp, set it to the center, then we're going to change it from linear to radial, then we're going to click on the second end color, we'll set it to black, press enter, we'll set the start color to, I don't know, why don't we make it green actually for FordeeTV, maybe a darker green. We'll select OK. We will change the value here to make this spread out more. And now we have this green to black ramp, or looks kind of like vignetted. Perfect, right? Next, we'll come over here. We'll click on the project pane. And now if we come over here to the beach scene, we'll click and we'll drag this. If we just drop it down here, it will put it below the black solid. Of course, we could have dropped it right above where we see this blue line and let go. Now it's on top of that black solid or our background layer. We can come over here to black solid, press enter, type BG for background, press enter, and now we know that's our background, right? We can't see it though, but that's okay because what I'm going to show you is how to create a text mask for this this beach scene, right? So I'm going to click on the text layer right here, and I'm going to click in my composition, and I'm going to write the word Barcelona, right? After I do so, I will select the selection tool right here so that I can reposition this maybe somewhere here so we get some of the building, etc. So the next kind of mask, if you will, is a track mat. Over here right now, you'll notice that Barcelona, the text layer, is on top of this beach scene, right? If I come over here to the track mat section and I click on this and select alpha mat, what it's going to do is the beach scene is going to inherit the transparency of the text layer. Now, if I go ahead and hide this layer and show you the text layer, you'll notice anywhere where that text is not, it doesn't exist, is transparent. We can hide the background and you can see, right? So again, I'll go ahead and show these two. I'll hide the Barcelona layer, and with this alpha track mat, it is using the area that is transparent. It is inherited, right? Now, if we wanted to switch this, right, we could come over here to alpha and set it to alpha inverted mat, right? And now what's happening is where the text of Barcelona is now that's transparent and it's showing you the background. I can show you that by clicking on the background here to hide it, and you see that it's transparent now, right? Obviously, in this particular situation, we'd want to use alpha mat, right? And now we can do all kinds of stuff with this. We can reposition this so wherever we see fit, right? Of course, we could set this beach scene and we could change the scale. So if we scale this down, we're seeing more of that beach scene in Barcelona. And obviously, when we get to right here, why don't we change its position? With the selection tool selected, we can click and we can drag, maybe bring this down somewhere right here. Now we're seeing all of this scene. Well, and obviously you want to play and you want to have it sit wherever you want it to sit, right? And you'll notice as I was clicking and dragging, it is snapping, right? We could turn off snapping right here. And now when we click, it's not going to snap to the corners, I'll go ahead and turn it back on. Doesn't matter for our particular example, but this is how you can use text to be a mask or a mat for another layer. Remember, layer order matters here, right? If I select the beach scene and I put it on top of the Barcelona layer, it wouldn't work because the beach scene doesn't have any transparency. You can do this for all kinds of stuff, right? Let's go ahead and show a layer mask. So right now we use text. I'm going to select these two layers. The first one, Barcelona text, the second one, and I'm going to press delete. Now we just have our background layer. I'm going to come over here and we're going to see that we have a starburst layer. I'm going to click and drag. You see where you see that blue line? I'm going to let go. This made this on top of the background layer. It's a bit too big, so I'm going to press S on my keyboard and I'm going to scale this down. Maybe something like this. Now, I'm going to come back over here. I think I have something else with some particles. I think that's right here. I'm going to drag this underneath the starburst layer. Now, if I want this starburst that I have set right here to use the particles behind it and use the starburst as a mask, I can do that. I can come over here to the particle layer, change the track matte, again, to alpha, right? Now, when I do that, notice that it is using this whole graphic. It doesn't matter. I'm going to undo that so you can see this again. And I'm going to turn the visit. Notice is whenever you apply that, it hides the visibility of the layer that you were using. I'm going to turn it back on by clicking on the eyeball here. You'll notice that this image has white, it has black, it has grays, etc. But all of it is solid. So when I turn this track matte on by clicking here, it's using that whole layer to show this, this animated particles that are dripping down like in a rain effect or whatever it might be. However, in this particular scenario, what would probably look cooler are the next options, right? The Luma Mat. And what the Luma Mat is doing is using the white, black, and gray values to show or hide pixels, right? So you'll see that if we turn this back on, any area that's white with the Luma Mat selected is going to show through all of the layer below. Layers that are gray will be partially opaque, and then layers that are black you will not see. So we could, of course, come over here and invert this. And when we invert this, what we're doing is we're using the starburst to show below, which is the background layer, right? I can show you that by enabling or disabling the background layer. So a Luma Mat uses luminosity, right? White, black, gray values to show or hide the layer's transparency. So now we've talked about text layers or text masks, layer masks, pen tool masks, or closed path masks, if you will. We've talked about parametric shape masks, and let's see. I think we only have a couple more things to talk about, and we're done. Let me switch my page of notes to see what we're looking at. Okay. Okay, so we have 3 more things to talk about, So the next thing we're going to talk about is preserve transparency. Preserve transparency basically tells the layer to use all the layer's transparency below as its transparency, right? Think of it, if you use Photoshop, it's like creating a clipping mask, So in order to show that, the first thing we're gonna have to do is hide this background layer, because right now, if I set anything above this background layer to preserve transparency, the problem is the background layer doesn't have transparency, right? So I'm gonna uncheck this, and then I'm gonna select these 2 layers, right click and go to pre-compose. When I do that, it puts them together in their own composition, right? Pre-comp 1. And in fact, we could rename this to Starburst. And now if I click on enter or OK, those 2 layers are here in a composition called Starburst. If I double click on Starburst, it opens up the Starburst composition where I can make changes, But now if I close that out, I'm here. I can go ahead and click on the text tool and I can type in FordeeTV, baby. Now when I click on the arrow tool, let's change this font to a different color. So while it's selected, over in the character pane, I'll click on white, I'll change it to red, and we'll say OK. Now it's much more in your face. You'll notice next to track matte, there is a T, and there's checkboxes next to the T. If I tell the text layer FordeeTV, it doesn't have to be a text layer, mind you. If I click on this right here, it says use the transparency of the layers below. The layers below, this area is all transparent. So is the text, right? So if I go ahead, I can then click on P for position, and I can move this around, and notice that it inherits all the transparency below. So interesting, useful. I haven't used this very much, but that's what it is, right? If I wanted to show this background below, look, as soon as I turn it on, then this doesn't work anymore. So I could select the FordeeTV layer, hold shift on my keyboard, click on the starburst, right click, go to pre-compose, and we'll call this preserve transparency. And see, did I spell that right? I don't know. Say okay. And now if I turn on the background layer, notice it's working because all that stuff is happening on this composition. Come on, there you go. I'm going to double click on it. I'll come over here to Fordee and I'm going to click on the P on my keyboard, click on the stopwatch, move ahead in time, and I'm going to change this maybe over to here, right? That's a fast animation, but just to show you, I can close out the preserve transparency composition, and in comp 1 where I have that background shown, if I press the space bar, you'll see that that text animates, preserving the transparency from the layers that it's using, etc. So super cool, right? Let's go into two more things and we're gonna call it done, baby. So I'm gonna go ahead in composition 1. I'm gonna highlight the first thing, press shift on my keyboard, highlight the next, press delete, and we are starting from scratch. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to drag in this right here. This is a gazpacho, right? A little bit too big. I'll right click on the layer, go down to transform, select fit to comp width, and now it is fit to comp width. It is quite a bit taller, right? But that's okay. What I want to show you is a tool that I have actually not used much, if at all. Huh? In fact, some people don't even know that this tool exists. I'm going to go ahead and change to a rounded rectangle tool, right? And I'm going to click and drag. Now, if I come over to the pen tool and I click and hold, there is something called the mask feather tool. If I select that, what I could do is click an area and drag, and notice that right now, all it did, this is a feather you're saying, right? But I could come over here and I can bring back these edges, right? And so what I'm doing with this tool is just using a feather on a certain edge, right? And obviously, if you need to draw more points, you draw more points. And if I bring this out here, now I'm just bringing transparency from this one point, right? And obviously, it jumps around to the different points that I drew, etc. And so that's kind of cool. In situations maybe where this would be useful is if you were compositing a sky into a background and one edge wasn't fitting exactly, but the rest looked good. Maybe you would use this tool. Huh? So one more real world example and we will call it quits. I'm going to come over here to Comp 1, select this, and press delete. Also, because I don't use the mask feather tool very often, I'm going to switch it back to the pen tool for easy access, right? Next, over here, what we are going to do is create another gradient ramp. I'll right click, say new, then go to solid. After I do so, make comp size, click on OK, select effects and presets, and drag this gradient ramp over. Whoops, what am I doing? Drag it on top of the solid, yo. Now we will switch it to a radial ramp, and then we will bring the start point by clicking here. And that looks nice. We're going to swap colors by clicking on this. We are going to make the white come out a bit more, something like that, so it kind of looks like a vignette. And perfect, right? Next, let's go ahead and type some text on. I'm going to click on the text tool. I'm going to type here, FordeeTV, baby. And maybe I like it to be in caps. I don't know why. Now, if I use the caps lock tool, notice as soon as I click here, it is going to tell me. Well, it didn't tell me, huh? Because I didn't click the caps lock tool. So now if I click with the text layer selected, with the caps lock on, there we go. It gives me the refresh error because caps lock on. If I turn off caps lock, boom, it's done. Now, if I wanted to reposition this, right, there is an align pane over here. If I click on it, select to align this both vertically and horizontally, it's now in the center. Perfect. This works a lot, or it works well for what it does, right? Next, let's say that I want to do something really cool here. I'll select this layer. I'll press Command D on my keyboard, and we will have a stroke and an outline for this text. So for the stroke, I'm going to select this layer. I'm going to come over here to my character, and I'm going to come to here, and I'm going to set this to be a stroke color. I'll set it to red, same as the other red, and boom, right? Next, the stroke over fill is 10. That's looking good. We are then going to select the color and turn it off. So now what you'll see when I turn this on and off, it just gets thicker, right? In fact, we could change the color in the fill because right here is just fill. In fact, we could just call this fill and we could call this one stroke. Now, if I go ahead to the fill layer and then I click to drag around a mask using the rounded rectangle tool right here, I can click and drag right here. Notice as soon as I did that, I'm clicking, like the text is not shown right here, right? So now, basically, if I turn off the stroke, you'll see that we don't see anything for the fill. And that's because the mask is set to add and the text exists above this mask. Well, that's fine. That's exactly what we want, right? So I'll bring the playhead to the beginning. I'll come over here to the mask. I'll click on the arrow right here. I'm going to set a keyframe for the mask right here, and then I'm going to drag this ahead maybe to a second and 15 frames. I'm going to then select the selection tool, double click on one of these points to select the whole thing, and then I'm going to drag this so that it fills here, right? And now if I drag this back and play it, we basically fill it up, baby. Fill it up. Obviously, we could change the color of the fill layer from red to another color by clicking on it here and selecting OK. And again, I'll go ahead and press play or preview by pressing the space bar. Anyways, guys, I hope I gave you a great preview in how to use masks and how beneficial they are. You will use them every day or whenever you're using After Effects. If you found this tutorial helpful or useful, please like, share, subscribe. I mean, really, share the video with your friends, guys. It will mean the world to me. Until next time, I'm out.